Hey, welcome to the Steep. So today we're actually going to launch Docker and get that installed here on Kali Linux. So for those of you who may not know, Docker is pretty heavily utilized for anything Kali oriented, anything penetration testing oriented as well. So what it really is just another virtual machine that we're going to put inside another virtual machine. So that's oversimplifying it, since a Docker container is a lot different than a virtual machine, but think of it that way. And in any case, the goal for this is the container, the Docker image that we're going to put all of our particular tools in will be self-contained. So, and that's the beauty of it. It just installs those files that you actually need to run a particular feature or feature set. So right now, Kali does not ship with Docker turned on or enabled, not to my knowledge anyhow. So we're going to go ahead and get that set up. So let's go ahead and launch our virtual machine here and we'll get started. And sorry, we had a little bit of delay there. And the reason for that is I wanted to show you everything coming up from start to finish. That way, there's no any hidden magic here. So it is Kali under the hood. I am running version 2026.2, I believe. We'll take a look at that really quickly. So let's get logged in. All right. And I know this is really tiny. I've got a Retina display, so it's a little bit hard to see at times. So let's just cat that OS release and confirm our version of Kali that's running. And you'll see here, it looks like we're on 2026.3 right now. So one thing that I'd like to advise you to do is go ahead and do an app update and an app upgrade. All right, and you can do a full distribution upgrade if it's been a little bit. Just make sure you set that to yes. In the interest of time, we may. Oh, sorry, I forgot the sudo command. We may need to speed this up, so I may pause this and let it continue its thing here, depending upon how aggressive this gets. But long story short, I pretty much try to update my Kali instance at least once per day, or at least weekly, if nothing more. So we should be in good shape after this. All right, we'll let it do its thing. And in the meantime, one of the things that we're going to do is actually bring up Firefox as well. And hopefully this is big enough. If you have a Retina display and you're not so sure how to change that, if you look in About Config, you can get that squared away. There's a particular setting that will allow you to bump up that URL size. So again, that's probably a lesson for a different day, but we'll skip ahead here. So one of the things that we want to do, just so you can follow along, is type how do I install Docker and Docker Compose, right? So those are the two things that we're going to be looking at here today. And then you can type it on Kali Linux, right? So, and if you have Black Arch, if you're using any type of Debian system, you know this should follow suit. Black Arch is a little bit different, so we can cover that in another lesson. But these will be the steps here that we're pretty much going to cover, right? So it talks about everything we're going to be doing here, and there are 5 steps. So probably giving you some nausea by scrolling through that really quickly. But anyhow, we're just doing our app update right now. So depackage front end, it looks like there's a lock, right? So it's asking me if I'm root. So yes, I was root. So we're going to run this again and see why we were having an issue with that. So, and the reason for that is I probably forgot to put that sudo in the second portion of that command. So again, as you're doing this, right, I traditionally will switch to root. I know a lot of folks don't like that. But where it's a pen testing platform, this is something that really depends on your personal preference. So, from my perspective, I do like to su over to root, but we'll run it in the container for right now. The container being the sandbox that is the actual Kali under bed user, or in this case, the steep user. All right, fantastic. Thanks for bearing with me on that. We should be good to go at this point. So our next step is actually going to be to install Docker and Docker Compose. So simply we can copy this, right? And you can click over here, whatever you're most comfortable with. And when we're ready, we'll just paste that in. And in this case, Docker Compose is not available, but is referred to by another package. So in this case, it has no installation candidate. So we probably want to troubleshoot that. So for now, we're going to go ahead and back that out and do Docker. And then we'll take a look at that app cache feature. So, and as you'll see here, they actually have a subnote as well that the plugin is newer. So try and using app install Docker Compose. We'll try that as well. And this will just take a moment or two. Again, depending upon how fast your system is, right? So if you want, pause the video. I like to leave these things kind of going full speed and normal speed so you can see what the installation would be. But obviously, your mileage is going to vary based on your ISP and how fast your internet connection is. I live out in the boonies, so mine's a little bit slower. If you do get this right, remove all Docker data. Sure, you want to go ahead and say yes for the moment. Everything will be permanently removed when Docker is purged. So if you're replacing Docker with another Docker distribution, you probably don't want to remove it. But in this case, I don't really have any Docker data. This is a fresh Kali install, so I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Okay, and at this juncture, we're going to try running that Docker Compose and see separately if we actually get anything with that versus the plugin. And in that case, it looks like it's going a little bit better. Light DM dot service, that's actually our display. So we're going to go ahead and say, yeah, that's fine. We can restart that and then select OK. And that will come back and have us sign back in. Then again, we'll have to launch a console. Blow that up a little bit more, and we'll come back and launch our Firefox instance. And beautifully enough, it kind of remembers what we were looking at. So we want to scroll back down, and at this juncture, we can choose to enable Docker. And what this is going to do is launch Docker at setup. So the Docker system will actually be enabled and running on the system. And we'll check that out in a second here. I'll show you how that looks. But if we wanted to, we could do status in Docker right now. And this would show us, hey, it is actively running and it is enabled. So doing this service probably is not necessary since it's already kind of configured to do that anyhow. But we'll go ahead and run through this just because. And sorry, let me copy it this way, just so you can see both instances. All right. Okay, and in that case, you probably noticed there's not going to be a lot of difference. So if we up arrow, you'll see really no change in that. So from our standpoint, the next thing we're going to do is actually create a non-root user that we actually run the Docker command with. So, or run the Docker instance with, and that is simply going to be Docker. And in our case, we'll probably run it with the Steep user account, and that's what that $ user is in global variable. That's going to grab our current ID. And just so you can see here, that is the Steep user. So, all right. And then if we just take a look at that, and we may need to run sudo on this. It's been a hot minute, so we'll just take a look at that group membership and see if we see anything for Docker. Oop. And you'll see the Steep user is now part of that group. So we've completed this command. So the next thing is to create a new group. If you wanted to, without requiring any type of system reboot, we can go ahead and apply this command. Perfect. And then lastly, we start to run Docker and see if we get anywhere. So our first command, and we'll go ahead and type this simply because I'd like to. For those of you who aren't aware of the shortcut, it's just Control L on your keyboard. That'll save you from having to type clear a lot. Or CLS if you're from the kind of Windows side of the house. Not that that will work unless you have some type of an alias setup, but again, Control L will clear that for you. So Docker version, in this case, it's showing us the Docker version. That looks good. And then we're also going to do Docker Compose version and see if we see any difference here. And in this case, that looks a little bit lower, right? So we got 2.40.33. So we should be good. So now our final step in vetting this has installed and it's ready for us is to simply run a Docker run hello world and see. In this case, it doesn't come back with anything, but it actually pulls it down. So that's a good step, right? That's a good sign. So because the message shows us that our installation appears to be working correctly. So that's really what we need. So if we wanted to, we could run an Ubuntu container. So if you want, let's go ahead and grab this really quickly, just so you can see it finish. And we'll paste this in. And in this case, it's pulling it down. So you can see it's got 40.71 megabits. It's got to chunk through. And now at this point, you'll see that we are now dropped into a root and we're right in that container. So, hey, that does it. Nice job. Hope everything's working for you. If not, drop me a notice and we'll get back to you. All right, take it easy. We'll see you on the next video. All right, guys. Bye.